Hey everybody, and welcome back to another One Candle Paranormal Case File. Here with your host, Vic Whateley.
And Marcus D.
And guess what, everybody? This time, it's actually going to be owls, as we talk about the Owlman. But this episode is brought to you by
Sarah, our Patreon subscriber. And if you guys would like episodes brought to you, think about checking out our Patreon and becoming a patron today. We got some great gifts on there, guys. But now, come along with us as we're going to talk about the Owlman of Cornwall.
In 1976, on April 17th, two young girls on holiday, June and Vicky Melling, were exploring around the Old Mawnan Church when they saw something very unusual. Up above the church's steeples, they saw a man-like owl creature hovering above. Their father, Don, when hearing of the tale, ended their holiday short. Although he refused to allow his daughters to be interviewed on what they saw, he did share with the public a drawing one of them had done, and this began the legend of the Cornish Owlman. For a long time now, our channel's greatest adversary, at least when it comes to what skeptics claim things are, has been owls, and it's odd for once to say, this time, it might be owls, or at least some sort of owl.
Yeah, when we were mapping out ideas for Season 4, it finally dawned on us that this whole time we've been talking about it, maybe it was owls, maybe it wasn't owls, and there's a whole cryptid called the Owlman that was spotted, and we hadn't done it yet. This was a great idea for a video for us.
And guys, one of the first things we have to tackle here is the elephant in the room. A lot of people throw this case out just on this guy's merit, and I don't think that's fair. So we want to talk about him for a little bit. So Marcus, tell us about the lead investigator.
I love this guy. You cannot have a conversation about the Cornish Owlman without bringing up Anthony Doc Shiels. I think that's how you say his name. This is just a larger-than-life guy in the field of the paranormal. This dude was a magician. He was a writer. He was just a showman.
And he was kind of pretty bizarre, too.
This is the guy that collects all of the initial information from the original stories. But right before this guy was traveling around doing magic shows, marketing himself as Doc Shiels, the Wizard of the West. At the same time the Cornish Owlman was going on, this dude was also trying to do stuff like raise a sea monster with a coven of nude witches. I can't make this up. This really happened. It was in the news. And if you're asking, was it successful? Let's just put it this way. We're talking about the Cornish Owlman, not that.
But as odd as this man is, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because he was the first investigator on the case and the lead person on it doesn't subtract from the many great stories of the bizarre and paranormal he was able to collect. Okay, but moving on from him. The appearance of the Owlman, and I kind of think that's a bit of a misleading name. It was not so much described as an Owlman as, you would expect the Mothman to be, where it's very humanoid with these owl-like wings. This thing was usually depicted as being a humanoid-esque sort of form, in some cases a little more avian-like, with, instead of arms, bird-like wings, giving it a more realistic biological form. Either way, it seemed to have left quite an impression on anyone who saw it, because he described it as being very terrifying, with a silverish gray sort of feather and large black talons, or sometimes described as claws. But of course, always with the characteristic red glowing eyes, something we've discussed several times before on this channel.
Yeah, everybody thinks that because of the red glowing eyes and the wings, they immediately jump to the Mothman. I mean, if you look up Mothman investigations, books, they always come back to the Cornish Owlman as another example of it. I'm not personally buying that. I don't think it's a good reference. Although they look similar, I think there's a notable difference between the two. For one, with a Mothman is sighting, there's often some sort of a massive tragedy that either occurs before or after, around the same time. You're not seeing that with the Cornish Owlman, at least nothing that jumps out in my mind. If I'm wrong, please let us know. I would like to know.
The similarities all strike me as being extremely superficial. I think we're dealing with two very distinctly different entities here.
There's also, even if you think about it, that curse that goes into people that investigate these sorts of things, that something bad is going to befall them. I mean, if you look at the original guy we were talking about, Anthony Doc Shiels, the dude's still alive. I mean, you can go and actually legit talking to him, so I don't really know if there's that connection that can be made. Now, explanations as to what the Cornish Owlman may be, obviously we're going to throw it out. We haven't brought it up in a while. Most people claim that it's an owl, that it's just a massive owl that people are sighting. Owls nest in churches sometimes. It was an area where giant owls can be spotted. And you know what? I'm absolutely terrified of birds, and I'm going to tell you now. If I'm walking around an area and I see some giant 3-foot owl that's hovering above me, I'm going to be freaked out, and I can guarantee you by the end of this story, it's going to be 20 feet tall, shooting laser beams out of its eyes with a serrated mouth speaking Latin. Like, it's just going to be that bizarre. Maybe they just got scared and just embellished the story.
But a 3-foot owl, that's a little bit of hyperbole. The largest owl on record was around 27 inches long, and that's a far cry from being 3 foot. Beyond that, the owls that normally, roost in that sort of area would be more like barn owls, which are even far shorter. But something that could be more convincing is perhaps this could be a hoax by the Shiels guy. Even some of his closest friends described him as being a hoaxer.
I mean, if you think about it, this guy's a showman. He's trying to make money. He's trying to market this type of stuff. He could have easily taken this, embellished it, ran with it, got a bunch of his buddies together to just try to cash in a quick buck on some girls that may have just seen an owl.
And it's very likely that he did over-exaggerate certain parts. Many people say that the original descriptions, without his biases added in, were way closer to the description of a giant owl than a humanoid owl. But even an owl of that size is anomalous in its own.
But now, guys, everything that we have said up to this point is stuff that you can typically find on other channels. We're always trying to move the conversation. We're trying to add something new maybe people hadn't thought of before. And this is where we're going to start doing that. There are some odd things about these stories that I don't think people bring up enough. The first one being is the location about where it's sited, like the Mawnan Church. That place in and of itself is strange to some of the local town folk. When people have gone there to interview them before, they talk about that it's very chilling to be there. They've seen some other weird stuff when they've been there, like hearing voices up in the trees when there's no winds that can make it. Odd animal behavior. I read an article that talked about a woman saying she saw a strange robin literally just dive bombing straight into a grave when it was there.
Yeah, and another thing about these stories that struck a bell with me, it's almost never reported by a local when they see the Cornish Owlman. It's almost always a tourist, someone on holiday, someone on vacation, or someone visiting, which is a very odd sort of coincidence.
In a lot of urban legends, most of them are propagated by the people that live there, the townsfolk. It's part of the culture. But not with the Cornish Owlman. It's always people that come to the area that have these encounters.
And usually they're people that aren't even going there looking for them. Something else that strikes an odd sort of bell with me is that it's almost always female, usually young female witnesses. There are some male witnesses, but in almost every case, they're accompanied by a young woman. Why? I'm having a hard time finding a good reason for it, even in the folkloric background, but it definitely strikes me as something very odd.
Another odd thing about the Cornish Owlman stories is the stories themselves. Something that stuck out at me. When you read the encounters that people have had with the Cornish Owlman, they don't really have a resolution. Go back and look at the various sources that detail these encounters. They talk about they were there for a particular reason, they're visiting on holiday. They see this creature up above, it flies up. They see it. No resolution. It's just like, it's happened, but it doesn't end. Whenever we did other stories involving cryptids, or if you ever look at them or tell stories, it's always, I ran away, it ran away, something drove it off. Just something akin to that. You just don't have this with the Owlman stories. We think there's something maybe to that.
And something else that made me kind of surprised is in two of the cases, both very close to each other, where likely the story wouldn't have contaminated the other one, the creature was described as having crab-like claws. Yeah, not bird-like talons, but black crab-like claws for feet. And I'd be very hard-pressed to say that someone's confusing those for bird talons. They're so exceptionally different.
Now, in trying to answer why are there all these odd pieces of the story, these odd occurrences, you kind of have to look outside of the story of the Cornish Owlman. At the same time that these were going on, there was a bunch of UFO sightings. that was going around in that part of England at that time, which kind of starts to maybe address this.
When it comes to UFO sites, especially associated with grays, there's something that comes up called screen memories. Memories that overwrite what actually happened. And when it comes to screen memories put over grays, one of the most common ones reported are owls. That these things are mentally disguising themselves as owls. Something else that comes up a lot when it comes to screen memories are slight anomalies, like these creatures that are trying to make these screen memories don't quite understand what they're supposed to be projecting. Something small, something off. Something like confusing talons for claws. Similar, but just off enough to be an anomaly. Also, this could explain some of the lack of resolution to these stories. Screen memories are concocted to confuse someone, to beguile someone, and to mislead someone. It may also be just kind of frosting over the resolution of it, where people will remember the encounter, but not exactly how it ended. Sorry we've been kind of all over the road on this one, but this is such a multifaceted story. There's no real way to cover it without kind of hitting from so many different perspectives. But now it's time for our thoughts on it. What's going on here from our perspective? For me, this reminds me a lot of Skinwalker Ranch in the Uquinta Valley, an area of anomaly where just strange things are happening involving like UFOs and spatial distortions and all sorts of bizarre things. And if you want to ask why was it there and then suddenly stopped, I don't have a solid answer. But that's the exact same sort of thing that they had there. That some places will just have these flaps of extreme bizarreness. And I think this old church might be one of them.
The biggest thing that sticks out to me in this is how this happens to tourists more often than not the locals. I always tell people that my favorite part about studying the paranormal is you are studying a piece of a particular area's folklore, a part of its culture. You're doing that with the Cornish Owlman, but from a very different way because these people really don't know that part of their culture. I read an article that talked about that most of the townsfolk there don't know about it. It's mostly the older people that know it. Now, why is that the case? Why is something going after tourists that's coming there? I don't know. Maybe it has to do with the people that are already there? I just want to scream, maybe it's an owl cult. We've talked about it before with the Bohemian Grove, these people worshiping this giant 30-foot owl in robes. Like, it feels like I'm missing the piece of the story where there should be people in robes right out, like meeting inside this church or something. I don't know.
The owl cult makes a degree of sense. I mean, owls have been worshipped throughout history in different parts of Europe. And beyond that, why would we only have people from outside the community talking about it? Because the people inside the community are already in the know.
Why does it always have to be owls with this stuff?
We'll let you guys argue that out in the comments below. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out our video on the Cornish Owlman. We had a great time making it. As you guys can tell, we got very passionately involved in this one.
Yes, we did. I think for a lot of season 3, we just got away from this weird connection of the paranormal and owls, and it felt so, I don't want to say good, it just felt right to finally come back to it in this video, I guess.
It all comes back around here at One Candle Society.
It all comes full circle back to the owls, like it really does. So we hope that our listeners that have listened to our videos in the past enjoy this episode, because I know that we did.
And if you guys did enjoy it, please like, share, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you get notified when we put out new content. And please, please, please support us on Patreon. It takes a lot of time for us to put out this content, and we could invest a lot more time into it if we didn't have to also do a full-time job.
That would be so nice. We'd love to bring you guys paranormal content, and that is the way that you guys can help us do that more for you by going to our Patreon and checking it out. And we do have some great gifts on there that you guys should go check out and see. But most importantly, keep believing.
Because we'll keep listening.